This Cavs at the Break episode of Cavs on the Break NBA podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network, is brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Aligned Health Center. Aligned Health Center is the first chiropractic biophysics clinic in Northern Ohio. The team at Aligned Health Center helps patients with back pain, neck pain, migraines, ADHD, digestive issues, sleep disturbance, whiplash, scoliosis, and much more. And along with chiropractic biophysics, Aligned Health Center is also the leading clinic in regenerative medicine. You may have heard of it as stem cell injections. And listen, you don't have to be an NBA player to get this done or have this treatment. If you have low back pain, if you have shoulder pain, knee pain, arthritis, check out the regenerative medicine clinic at Aligned Health Center. Come in for a free consultation, get some imaging done and x-rays to see how Aligned Health Center can help you. Look, there are no multiple shots, and it's complete with physical therapy built into the process, so there's no downtime. And look, it gets even better. Aligned Health Center doesn't charge people for x-rays or exams, and they don't bill you later. They let you know right away up front the amount that this is going to cost. They're completely transparent. They're number one for a reason. Call Aligned Health Center at 440-385-7357 or visit their website at alignedhealthcenters.com to make an appointment and learn more about how Aligned Health Center can help you. Again, that's 440-385-7357 or visit alignedhealthcenters.com. Also want to take this time to give some shouts to the Press Play Podcast Network. Just incredible stuff going over at pressplaypodcast.com, and I could not be more proud. The past month alone, we've launched 2 new shows. The first one is a show all about CBD oil and THC. This podcast is called the Phenomenal CBD Podcast. You can check that out to learn all you need to know about, well, CBD and THC, its health benefits, its legal journey, and everything else in between. The Phenomenal CBD Podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. We also launched a brand new network show, the Premier Fantasy Podcast with Tito. This show will bring you fantasy football, basketball, and baseball insights and opinions from a media fantasy expert in Jeff Tito Thidoff, formerly of 97.1 The Fan in Columbus. If you play fantasy sports and want an extra edge to bring home that championship, that long coveted championship, make the Premier Fantasy Podcast a regular part of your podcast routine. The Premier Fantasy Podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also launching 3 more shows over the next 5 weeks, so make sure to keep your ears and eyes peeled for those announcements. In this episode, Sam and I are joined by Broadus of the 3-point conversion to talk about trade scenarios and possibilities of the Cavs, the state of the team at the All-Star break, and we reach into our mailbag to answer questions from you. It's great to have L.A. my boy, with us, one of the nicest guys in the biz. Check his stuff out, 3-point conversion, and we're so glad to bring you this episode. I hope you enjoy the show.
Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is a city of champions once again. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.
That sound means it's time for Cavs on the Break NBA podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm your host, Chase Smith, and with me, he's the editor and writer at 48minutes.com, assistant editor at outkick.com. He's our Cavs insider, national NBA writer, Sam Amico. Sam, it is good to talk to you, my man.
Yeah, it's good to be back, and here we are at the All-Star break already.
We are at the All-Star break, and also joining us to help us talk about the Cavs and all that's going on. He covers the Akron Zips, your Cleveland Cavs, and Cleveland Browns for the 3-point conversion. Good friend, L.A. Broadus, L.A. What's good, my man? Glad to finally have you on with us.
Hey, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk with 2 greats like you guys, and I'm excited. Like we said, we're at the All-Star break, so Cavs needed a break. Seems like so. Yeah.
Yes. Well, let's get after it, Sam. Let's start with some Amico bombs you dropped on Amico Hoops just this morning, March 4th, as we are going straight ahead to the All-Star break and the trade deadline. Dropped a couple bombs. You said in our 48 minutes, Cavs are open to trading Cedi Osman, JaVale McGee, and Taurean Prince along with Drummond. Sam, are they looking to add those pieces to a Drummond trade, or tell us a little bit about what that might look like?
I think there are a number of options there. We've heard the Nets, of course. I don't know how they would make a deal. Are one of the teams interested in Drummond? We've heard, probably about half the league has some sort of interest in Drummond. but because of his contract, the fact that it's huge, the fact that it's expiring, we've heard a lot of buyout talk. So the Cavs may have to add a piece to sort of sweeten a Drummond deal. Obviously, Chetty would be that kind of guy. I've heard the Clippers and the Nets, people are telling me, have interest in Chetty. So I don't know if you could feasibly make it work financially to trade, let's hypothetically say, Drummond with Chetty. I just don't see how the Cavs would be able to make that work financially. So I think that those are all type of separate things where the Cavs are saying, okay, we're open to moving, these three guys. Obviously, they're going to trade or buy out Drummond. He won't be a part of things. But those other three guys are also available, perhaps in separate deals.
So would they be looking to get more in return, a higher draft pick, or aside from just moving on from Drummond, Sam, what would be the benefit for the Cavs in adding a piece like Chetty or Prince, who seemed to kind of contribute at least minutes and kind of productive minutes off the bench?
Well, Prince started strong. He kind of faded. Injuries have something to do with that in Prince's case. Chetty is in year 4 now and is proving to be very hit or miss, which is fine if you're a contending team. The Cavs are not a contending team at the moment. So, perhaps, ideally you get back draft picks and a young guy with upside who may be, maybe a player who may not be doing much in his current situation, but somebody who you view as somebody who could help you long term. Cavs are kind of outside of their core young 4 there of Sexton, Garland, Jared Allen, and Isaac Okoro are kind of in the experiment stage where they're they can take risks on guys who have upside, young guys, and those are the kind of players you're looking for in return. If you can get a player like that or two with dealing Drummond, Osman, Prince, or McGee, then you're going to do that. And you're also looking for draft picks, just the usual fare of things that can help you kind of rebuild your program.
Sure. L.A. Which of those 3 players, Drummond notwithstanding, would you miss the most? Osman, McGee, or Prince?
To be honest with you, I mean, it's nostalgia with Chetty, of course. But the one intriguing piece that I definitely wanted to ask Sam about as well is that we've seen JaVale come in so much and spell out Allen. It seems like they like that tandem because they kind of play a little similar. With them already setting Drummond aside, I mean, if we try to move JaVale, I mean, are we looking at trying to get a piece back in return, or because they released Bolden, so who's coming in to fill that spot then that JaVale has played so many minutes for?
Yeah, I agree with you. First of all, JaVale has been such a veteran voice and a nice presence off the bench. He knows.
And also, if Garland is injured for an extended amount of time, we can just throw Miguel at point guard and we're good to go.
Well, I was getting to that, Chase.
Okay, I did interrupt.
But I was going to say that he is, he's probably of those 3, at least when you're talking about this season alone, the most valuable guy for the exact reason that LA mentioned was the fact that, when Allen needs a breather, you're turning to a guy who's been there before in McGee. But, also on top of that, you're right. If they trade him, well, they better bring back another big guy, another center, because now you're down to just Allen. And I'm sure that they would consider that. But I think if you can with McGee, if you can move forward with him, you need veterans on the team. Now, if you get rid of Drummond, Love isn't around. Love isn't much of a leader in terms of, a strong voice in the locker room anyway. He's more one of the guys. And that's okay. I mean, that's just his personality. But you need one of those veteran leaders around, even if you are building a young core. So I would be real hesitant to give up on JaVale McGee because he's proven to be a good fit, kind of a good assistant coach on the floor for JB Bickerstaff. And I think out of those three, my choice, least guy you'd want to move least is McGee.
Just don't ask K-Love about a Sexton Westbrook comparison in the locker room. That'd be my only advice to anyone talking to K-Love in the locker room. Sam, you mentioned in your article that the Cavs might even entertain a trading Larry Nance Jr. Don't tell me it's not so. He's got to stay in the wine and gold, Sam.
I don't think they're going to trade him. I think that other teams certainly, that he has certainly drawn a lot of interest around the league. And teams here, okay, the Cavs are kind of going to be quote unquote sellers at the trade deadline. Can we get them to give us Larry Nance Jr.? Unless you knock their socks off, the answer is going to be no. I mean, he's an Akron guy. His dad played for the Cavs. And I mean, forget all that. Just what he brings to this team is, he's going to be your starting power forward. Ideally, theoretically, he's going to be your starting power forward moving down the line here, whereas Kevin Love is not. So I don't think that the Cavs are going to be calling. In fact, I'm sure they're not going to be calling people saying, "What will you give us for Larry Nance Jr.?" But other teams are going to say, "What will you take if will you trade us Larry Nance Jr. if we give you X, Y, and Z?" And in most cases, I would imagine those offers aren't going to be nearly good enough.
Yeah. And LA, to your point, LA, like I think if we do move on from JaVale McGee, LA, do you see it that we could go small ball with Nance Jr. and even if Love does come back to kind of spell, like if we don't get a bit, I know we need length and size, but is it possible that we could, in those minutes giving Allen off on the bench, go to this like smaller Nance Jr., K-Love if he's back? Like, is that something that you can see them doing?
I mean, they've done it before, most definitely. Is it a favorite of mine? No. And then also too, them guys just coming back. I mean, you don't want to just, I guess, throw them in the fire necessarily. You kind of want to. For me, I would much rather see Nance and K-Love stagger when they come back, just because of them coming back off the injuries. But I mean, we've seen them run those lineups, and we've seen what JB has been able to do as far as mixing them up. But it's not a favorite lineup of mine at all. So Sam, speaking of Larry Nance, I know you said that the Cavs aren't looking to trade him, and we know that it's a business. We even seen Larry come out on Twitter too and say that he would love to retire here, and we know that he's really trying to follow in the footsteps, kind of like of his father, and of course he loves the area. What's your percentage as far as like us being able to see Larry stay a Cav for life?
I would think it's in the 90% range that he could remain here. Again, it's hard to find a guy who is all about not just the franchise. I mean, he grew up obviously a Cavs fan, and he's playing for the team that he dreamed of playing for. And he's living where he grew up, in the Northeast Ohio area, the Akron area. And I think that the odds are good, especially when you consider what he brings. People will consider him kind of a role player, but he's the ultimate role player. He's a guy who does just about every little thing well. He's an outstanding athlete. He, believe it or not, he's been around the league for a while, but he keeps getting better. When healthy, he keeps improving. So I just think that because he wants to be here, he seems to be content in any type of situation, and this is his hometown, and the Cavs love him. I think that it's going to make a long time perfect marriage. Somebody would really have to knock their socks off to get them to trade him, and frankly, nobody's going to do that right now. I don't foresee that coming. So I think he's definitely here for the long term.
I love how he features local businesses and, gives them shouts out, just really endearing to the city, as if he needed any more endearment to the fans in Cleveland. The absolutely fan favorite. Love that guy. Sam, I feel like really for the past couple of years, we're always talking about Cavs trades, and none so much than this Drummond trade that is or some type of transaction moving forward. In your other article you dropped this morning at 48minutes.com, You mentioned that Knicks are still the front runner. Is that where you would expect Drummond to land? Or let's look into your crystal ball maybe. And how do you see this Drummond situation coming? Because he hasn't played ball in 2 weeks. They have sidelined him. They are not, they're not shy about their intentions with Drummond. How do you see this ending up?
I think the buyout option is probably going to be the most feasible. But that said, I think if he is traded, the Knicks make the most sense. They have pieces that they would be willing to give, that could make a deal work. With a centerpiece kind of being Kevin Knox, who just has not gotten much of an opportunity in New York, and is a nice young player with upside, the kind of guy that I described earlier. And I'll throw this at you. Kevin Knox, his agent, is a Cavs season ticket holder.
What?
He's from Cleveland. Yeah, he went to Orange High School. So he there's that connection there, not to mention the fact that the Cavs' longtime salary cap guru, Brock Aller, is now in his first season with the Knicks. So there's a lot of connections there with New York. And I do think that teams want to trade for Drummond because if there's a buyout, guess what? He's going to be a free agent. That'll make him a free agent. Then you have to fight over him to get him. Yeah. So the only way to guarantee yourself Andre Drummond, if you're an opposing team, is to make a trade for him. So, anybody can sneak in out of the blue and have their reasons for trading for Drummond. We never saw the Cavs trading for him last year until the trade deadline. Nobody predicted that.
Yeah.
So
it was around this time last year, really.
Yeah. And Chris Grant, the former GM of the Cavs, once told me trades are an extremely hard thing to predict because, number one, you're dealing with people. They're not just commodities. The players are people. And the opposing general managers are people. It's not like you're out there trying to sell a vacuum cleaner, Yeah. You've got to deal with personalities. And, the idea is to improve your team, but also give the player, an opportunity to be somewhere where he feels good about it. Because, you never know when that player may have an opportunity to return or whatever. So,
yeah.
There's a lot to trades, but just from a guy who's kind of putting the pieces together, and that's all I'm doing here. And Drummond is from New York and would be very open to playing for the Knicks. One source kind of got this ball rolling and said the Knicks are going to be the front runner in all this if he's traded. And you put the pieces together, and that sure seems like it would make the most sense. The question is, what are the Knicks going to be willing to give up, and how well would he fit there is things that the Knicks need to consider.
LA, how do you feel that Kevin Knox would fit with the Cavs?
I definitely like Kevin Knox, the player. My biggest thing, and like I was gonna throw to you guys, is that we seen Drummond, come from the Pistons and their fall sort of over the years. Then we seen him come with Cleveland. He was enthusiastic at first, then it just didn't play out. Now with the Knicks, we know they're rising as a team, but at the same time, like it can crash and burn because again, they're the Knicks and they've shown us a pattern. So really my question would be is like how long do we see that being a good fit for him? I know being from there is okay, but I mean, even speaking personally, once I moved back home for a little bit, it got boring real fast.
I feel like with what Tibbs has got going in New York, I just feel like in order to maximize Drummond's skill set, he needs to go to kind of like an old school style team. And I think just the Knicks and Tibbs makes sense. I think if Drummond goes to the Knicks, he'll go back to averaging almost 20 and 20, and it'll just be exactly kind of like the production we saw in Detroit and his first couple weeks and moments here in Cleveland. I think if he goes anywhere else, he's just going to be really expensive, big that you can get cheaper everywhere. I feel like to maximize Andre Drummond, you need a team like the Knicks and a coach like Thibodeau to to maximize what he's got, Sam. That's just my opinion. I I have Julius Randle in my fantasy basketball team, so I don't want Drummond to come in and take all of his rebounds. But I really think Tibbs has at least the Knicks playing competitive ball, and I think Drummond would thrive there. Sam, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I think it'd be a good thing for the Knicks to consider your fantasy team.
Yes,
when making moves. Chase isn't going to like this, so let's skip it. But no, I agree with you. I think looking around the league and looking at Andre Drummond's game, the Knicks would seem like the best fit. We heard today the Chicago Bulls have an interest. I don't know where you would really put him because, Wendell Carter Jr. is still kind of up and coming. And I don't think Andre Drummond's going to want to go somewhere where he comes off the bench or is battling for minutes. I mean, part of the problem with him in Cleveland was, he was not happy when they traded for Jared Allen, and Jared Allen was taking his minutes. So in New York, you wouldn't have that issue. So I think, look, the possibilities are endless with him because you don't know, what the Cavs are going to do and or who's going to all of a sudden express interest and make a trade offer. So a lot of things are at play here. From the Cavs end, you just have to try to, be wise about it, not take on bad contracts just to trade him. If you have to buy him out, then you have to buy him out. And then, you still have a ton of salary cap space as your reward.
Love it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Cavs at the break on Cavs on the break and dip into the mailbag. So we'll be right back.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. We read one book a month and then we talk about it. Books like Stephen King's The Shining or Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. If you're on the hunt for book recommendations and enjoy sparkling conversation, come read along with us and then listen in.
Hi, my name is Sam Post, owner of Phenomwell CBD store and PhenomwellCBD.com. That's like phenomenal, PhenomwellCBD.com. Tune in where we talk with experts about how the amazing hemp plant can make a difference for people's health and well-being from the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Powell, co-host of the Oranges, Oranger, Browns podcast. Check us out anywhere you listen to podcasts. For all your Browns coverage, post-game, pre-game, anything you need Browns, you'll find it here on the Oranges, Oranger, Browns podcast.
Hey, it's JD from the Hyman Podcast. I created this podcast to have hard conversations. Conversations that make us human but are also wildly uncomfortable. Conversations that help give voice to the voiceless and to the marginalized. Now you can listen to the entire first season on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Consider this your personal invitation to join the conversation.
All right, back with L.A. 3-point conversion and Sam, the jigsaw master, Amico, putting together all the pieces at the trade deadline. Hey, so we are at the All-Star break with the Cavs. Let's talk about the state of the team at the break. The Cavs won 4 of the last 5. They almost had a 5-game win streak. They lost a close one to the Pacers last night. Currently, they are 14-22, second to last in the East, 3.5 games back out of the 8th playoff spot. They had a really rough February. A brutal West Conference road trip is just this gauntlet of teams that wore the team down. I want to talk about a couple of things before we get to the mailbag. First off, I think there's a couple things that I want to talk about. Garland's injury. Darius Garland left the game last night with an injury. Sam, do you have an update on Garland's status moving forward? I know the break couldn't have come at a better time for that, but is that something we should be concerned about in a couple weeks?
It doesn't seem that way. I mean, it's still very early, and the Cavs haven't really released any information on that. But it sounded like they suspect that it's a minor thing. So I don't think that will be necessarily a big thing to be concerned with, especially now that you're getting some time off and time to let it heal.
It did seem L.A. that the Cavs' style of play did change when he was out. I mean, we've seen that before, and the Cavs took a few moments to adjust to that. Another thing I want to talk about is the emergence of Dean Wade and maybe a little bit of beeline ball. I don't know if I doubt anyone in the Cavs would give him credit. I know he came undrafted at Kansas State. L.A. Just how has the emergence of Dean Wade impacted the last 5 games for the Cavs?
It's been very satisfying, actually. I tweeted out last night. I said, the man, the myth, the legend, the best D Wade to be on the Cavs team.
Oh man.
But the legend of Dean Wade is definitely alive and real. I can see from the fan base that everybody's very, very excited about him. He seems like he's just a hard worker, and he puts his, takes his lunch pail to work, and just kind of does his thing. And then I know they tweeted out the video the other day of all of them like having fun, with the wrestling and stuff like that. So ultimately, I think he brought an element that we definitely needed in that lineup, and that was height at that position, because we were starting Prince at the 4 for a little bit. And I just thought we needed to get a little bit bigger, and I think he complements Allen very well, especially since he can pass and can also shoot that 3-pointer, kind of like how Nance was doing when he was in the lineup.
And I feel like you kind of hit it on the head a little bit there, L. Sam, February, one of the biggest kind of like glaring weaknesses was like the lack of an outside shot. Of, man, we need an outside presence, and Wade comes in and he just gets buckets. Sam, is this what we're going to expect to see from him? I mean, is this really Dean Wade, what we're going to see?
You hope so. He does kind of extend the floor a little bit, which they desperately were needing without Love and Nance. They needed they needed a big to get going from the outside, and he's offered that. He's still a young guy. This is usually when guys start to come into their own, when they get an opportunity because of injuries or something else. This is usually the year, second, third year that guys get an opportunity and start to come through. So hopefully that's his case, the case with him. I went down last year and saw him play with the Canton Charge one game. It wasn't to go see him, but, it was just to go to a game as a fan and enjoy it. And the guy looked like freaking Larry Bird down there. I was like, well, this guy's unstoppable. Who is it? And I was like, oh, that's Dean Wade. So, I certainly saw some things down there that you think, boy, if that can, even some of that can translate to the NBA, he could be a nice pickup for them. And it's starting to show. Some of those things are starting to show. So whenever you have young players, all you're hoping for is some consistency. So can he do it consistently in the second half of the season? That remains to be seen. But that, he's off to a nice start.
And I think the big question here, guys, is how soon is LA going to get a D Wade jersey? I think that's really kind of where we're at here.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah. I'm still in love with Okoro, but Dean Wade is making some pretty good strides. Hey, let's talk about Okoro. Sam, what would you want to see from Okoro the last half of the season?
Just continuing to do what he's been doing, which is showing some progress, making some progress in terms of his offensive. I would say he's got the skills, and those are developing at the NBA level, but just to get more confidence. And you know what? That's just coming from playing, here I am in the NBA. I've got to guard the opposing team's best player every night. I can't worry about shooting, but I think he's starting to get a feel for the NBA game. And that's, that takes a little bit of rookies. We've seen that with every rookie other than LeBron James in Cavs history. It just takes a little bit to get your feel and your flow. And I think he's picked that up the past couple of weeks. Ideally you'd like to see him be more consistent offensively. But you got to give him time and defensively. I mean, imagine the coach saying, hey, tonight you're guarding, and this happened to him before the West Coast trip. Tonight you're guarding the best player on the Clippers, and then you're going to follow it up with 2 nights in a row of guarding Giannis. And,
Yeah.
when we go on the West Coast, you're going to guard Damian Lillard,
Right.
so.
Well, and that came off of, hey, you're going to guard KD.
Steph.
Right. And that came off of the, hey, you need to
Right.
guard
Yeah,
KD a couple games. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, this is, for anybody, that would be a tall task. But for a kid who's, just turned 20, is and 1 year removed from college, there's a lot to ask of him, and they're okay with it. They're okay with it. The growing pains, you have to be. But theoretically, in a year or two, he's going to be your defensive stopper at a very key position.
It does seem he tends to pick and choose his spots, and he's pretty conservative that way. I would like to see him be just a little more aggressive, get to the free throw line a little bit more, but that will come. L.A. I took it a little personally that he wasn't invited to the Rising All-Stars game. I felt like that was a personal attack against Chase Smith, but I won't hold it against anyone. Sam, any snubs you feel like the Cavs? I don't think the Cavs have any All-Stars, do they?
No, and part of that is because I think a big part of that is, well, they don't have any All-Stars, but part of the Rising Stars snub, I'm sure, is the fact that the league went to the USA versus the world type of format. So, there are certainly some international players, I'm not going to name names, that aren't as good as Sexton and Garland. So, but because of the format, it used to be rookies versus sophomores. And if you do that, then you're taking the best first and second year players. Then certainly, I shouldn't have said Sexton because he's in his third, but Darius Garland certainly more deserving than some of the guys that are on the world team. That's for sure.
Yeah. We're going to jump to our mailbag, LA. This first one is for you. Friend of the show, good buddy, Chris Mikesell. He was on our draft show at the President 34. Give him a follow. He asks, where do you think Jarrett Allen is in the pecking order on the Cavs? Could he be argued as the second best player on the team? L.A. What say you?
Absolutely. I mean, the only other person that's really, just blowing it out the water is Colin Sexton. But I mean, you can actually argue that he's actually the best too, because Allen does so many different things. I mean, besides just scoring, he also rebounds. People are scared to drive against him in the hole. He just alters the entire, like, the paint, and he gets those hustle plays. I mean, last night you seen him get like a floor burn, like trying to dive because everybody was just standing around looking at the ball, and he just jumps on it. So it's like he just has this motor. He doesn't really care about throwing up all the points, it doesn't seem like, but I mean, he just fills the stat sheet so much. So he can actually arguably be the better player, just period.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I think what he brings to the team just allows everyone else to do what they want to do. I think.
Oh, and not to mention the field goal percentage too. I mean, he's extremely efficient too. So.
Yeah, I think the only players that could be in that conversation may be Garland, maybe Nance, the way he was playing before he got injured. But no doubt about it, Allen or Sexton are the best players on the Cavs. And it's unfortunate. And I feel like, Sam, we've talked about this a couple of times in previous pods. Either of those players are usually never the best player on the court. And we know the NBA, a lot of times it comes down to who has the best player. And I think until the Cavs get that bona fide, oh, he's the best player on the court, I think this is kind of the fate of what the Cavs are going to be. Trying to be at 500 until they get that bona fide, that's the best player on the court. I don't really see a higher ceiling, Sam. Is that too harsh? Is that too pessimistic?
No, I think that's accurate. You see the games where Sexton is the best player on the court. That, the other night against the Rockets, he outplayed, even though John Wall had a fantastic game. Sexton outplayed John Wall and Victor Oladipo and was the best player on the floor that night. The Cavs won in Houston. Yeah. So I think that's close. More often than not, you want to have the best player on the floor. And if you don't do that, then you want to be a team, I would say, when they're healthy, kind of like the Pacers, that just play as a unit and are always in the playoffs, it seems, even though they don't really ever go anywhere. They're just one guy away, and they're doing it kind of as a team. So the best option is the option that you talked about, is that you want to try to get a real star. And if you can't do that, then you've got to get it done as a team. By the way, a prominent agent just texted me. Maybe he's listening into our conversation. I don't know. I think he read my story earlier, but he said the only player that the Cavs should be untouchable is Allen. That's it. Anybody else, they should be open to moving, which kind of surprised me. You wouldn't think that they'd be open to moving Sexton, and I don't think they are. But that's just his opinion, is saying Jared Allen is the one guy who should be the only untouchable on the roster.
Well, and I think too, because there are a lot of players of Sexton's caliber, more than of what Allen can do.
Sure.
And I know Sexton does what he does really, really well, and probably should at least be considered an all-star. But I just feel like Allen's are more rare than Sexton's type of skill at that position, what they want.
Sure. Yep.
All right, next one. This is from @Conan O'Grindon. @Conan O'Grindon. Sam, I'll throw this to you. He asks, what is K-Love's most useful role for the second half of the season, assuming he returns?
Yeah, the thing about the Cavs offense that a lot of people don't realize, which is why not having Love or Nance Jr. there, is so much of their offense, the first pass usually goes to the power forward. So it kind of runs through the power forward in their half court sets. So, from that sense, he gives you a veteran at that position who, obviously kind of gets the ball rolling when you're not able to score off the break. And obviously he gives you that outside threat that another one that they really need, a deep threat that they really need. And if you're going to move Drummond, it's certainly not going to hurt to have another guy who collects a lot of rebounds next to Allen and is in there battling for rebounds with him. So, I mean, from those standpoints, Kevin Love is still a valuable piece. It's just, he's not going to be a part of things moving forward in terms of, I wouldn't think he's going to be a long-term. I mean, he's 32, and I just don't think that he's going to be valuable. Now, if you're the Cavs and you're saying, look, we want to get to that play-in game, which I believe they do. They are saying that. We want to get to the playoff play-in game. Okay, finish with the top 10 seed, get these guys some postseason experience. Then Kevin Love is going to be a kind of guy who's going to help you get there.
Yep. Final question here, L.A. from @Kegger Media Pods. It's just incredible group of followers we got with us here. They ask, this is NBA general. Are the Warriors legitimate contenders when Clay comes back next year? L. What do you think, man?
Wow. I mean, yeah, you have to consider them to be contenders. It's just that the rest of the NBA has, like, it kind of seems like they kind of caught up to them a little bit, like talent wise and stuff like that. I mean,
the West,
like, what the Nets are building. You have what the Lakers currently still have, what the Clippers still currently have. You have Denver, you have Utah. It just seems like there's so many teams out there that, at one point it's kind of wild because you look back and you've seen the Warriors just be like the King Kong of the NBA. And then now it's like, they got older, the injuries happened, KD left. And I can see them, they're trying to rebuild and stuff and retool, of course, but they locked themselves up really nicely with, re-signing everybody with Steph, Clay, and Draymond. So I really can. I mean, you're never gonna just count them out when they have Steph and Clay on the floor, of course, but that's gonna be a tough one. I wouldn't put them like in my top 3 or something like that.
Sam, what do you think? Currently, right now, without Clay, the Warriors are 19 and 17 and 9th in the West. Without Klay Thompson, Steph hasn't lost a step. Dre is still a facilitator. Does Clay get them in that Utah, Denver kind of conversation, or do they put him in the Laker Clipper conversation?
I think it would put him in with the Denver Utah more likely.
Or I
First
guess
of all,
Utah's killing it this year, so that's just
yeah,
like
but you know, as far
Yeah.
as tradition wise,
yeah.
I think that, and I hate to say it, but you'd be surprised if Klay Thompson came back the same guy after two major leg injuries, and age on top of that. That's tough, and just history shows us that guys don't usually come back the same after those type of injuries. Now, if he comes back close to the same, well, veteran teams are typically the teams that when you have veteran stars, that's when you typically win in the playoffs. So you're going to have Draymond, Steph, Klay, and surrounded by some young athletic types. You've also got Andre Wiggins there. The veteran teams you can't count out in the playoffs, and this is a team that has been together a while. They're key pieces, and so you can't count them out. Now, they're not going to be a power, but they'll be a player, I think, with when Klay Thompson comes back.
Yep. Well, that does it for this episode of Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Thank you all so much for downloading and listening. Shouts to our presenting sponsor, Alliant Health Center. Shouts to the Press Play Podcast Network for making this work. Shouts to L.A. for joining us today. Hey, L.A. Where can we find you on the interwebs?
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at LA_Broadus. And thank you so much for having me.
Oh, of course, man. And I want to give shouts to Sam. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Amico Hoops. Catch all of his work and writings at 48minutes.com and Outkick.com for all breaking news, insider info. Do not miss out. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Cavs on the Break. We always follow back. Sam, offer any final thoughts, brother?
No, enjoy the break, and I hope L.A. will join us again.
Yes, for sure. All right. Well, Mike Breen, take us out.
Congratulations, Cleveland. Your decades-long wait is finally over. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.